descending to 70 meters in Arctic waters near Greenland's coast. The water here is near freezing. Visibility barely 15 meters to the murky blue-green depths. Scattered wreckage litters the seabed. Metallic debris half buried in white sand and ice fragments. We're close to the crash site. There she is, the Superfortress. Massive and unmistakable, lying on her belly with the tail section angled upward. United States Army Air Force's markings barely visible beneath algae and marine growth. Those are R-3350 engines, confirming this is definitely a B-29 bomber. The bombardier's position ahead shows shattered plexiglass windows, a dark empty cavity where men once fought. Approaching the cockpit area carefully. Easy now. Just an Atlantic wolffish emerging from the fuselage, territorial but not aggressive in these waters. Entering the aircraft through the broken nose section. Everything is heavily corroded after 77 years underwater. The bombardier remains at his post, skeletal hands still positioned at the bomb site. His name tag, partially visible, tells a story frozen in time. Moving toward the cockpit canopy section, we find it completely flooded, now home to hundreds of Greenland cod swimming in circular patterns. The pilot's compartment reveals flight instruments still in place, their faces cracked but needles frozen in final readings. The pilot himself went down with his aircraft, still seated with corroded seat belts across his pelvis, dog tags hanging from his cervical vertebrae. We can identify him now. He's going home. His family, waiting 77 years, will finally have closure. Moving toward the dorsal gun turret position, we find twin 50 caliber machine guns pointing skyward, barrels heavily rusted but still mounted. Serial numbers intact mean we can trace this aircraft's complete history through military records. Major structural damage here, possibly from impact or the immense pressure of shifting ice. Inside the fuselage, the radio operator died at his station, headset still on his skull. The radio log lies before him, frozen in history, too fragile to retrieve without destroying invaluable evidence. Personal belongings scattered throughout the cabin speak of lives interrupted in an instant. Flight jackets hanging on hooks, corroded canteens, rotted leather boots. Each item a remnant of young men who never came home. The tail section still stands remarkably intact, angling 30 degrees upward from the seabed. Looking for the tail identification number now, carefully brushing away thick marine growth and sediment. The numbers emerge, 442265. We can identify this aircraft now and solve a 70-year mystery. The tail gunner protected his crew to the very end, hunched in his cramped position facing backward toward the guns. A wedding ring on his finger bone, gold band oxidized but intact. Someone has been waiting for him to come home. The engraving inside reads M+S 1943. A love story ended in these frozen depths. The bomb bay still carries its deadly load. 500-pound general-purpose bombs hang in their racks, heavily rusted and potentially unstable after decades underwater. We proceed with extreme caution. This entire wreck is not just a historical site, but a war grave containing dangerous munitions. Moving clear of the ordnance area, we examine the landing gear partially retracted, wheels embedded in sand. The tires rotted away long ago, leaving only corroded metal hubs as evidence of the aircraft's final descent. Faded nose art becomes visible on the fuselage side. Carefully brushing marine growth reveals letters. Lucky. The paint has mostly disappeared, but these personalizations made each bomber unique to its crew, a small piece of home painted on cold aluminum. A sudden appearance. An enormous Greenland shark, 5 meters long with blind-looking eyes and parasites hanging from its face, passes within 1 meter. These ancient scavengers are harmless, but utterly intimidating at this size. Don't move. It continues past, completely indifferent to our presence. Right are 3350 duplex Cyclone engines, one producing 2,300 horsepower each, now frozen in corrosion. The complex machinery has been reduced to oxidized sculpture, yet every component tells a story of American engineering at its wartime peak. Fuel tanks ruptured during impact still occasionally leak petroleum, creating rainbow patterns on the water surface far above. Environmental impact remains visible after all these years, a reminder of the toxic legacy war leaves behind. Both waist gunners died at their posts, skeletal hands still gripping gun handles and triggers. These men defended their bomber until the very end, firing at enemies that never came, protecting brothers who would all perish together. The ventral gunner station, the most isolated position on the aircraft, holds its occupant in a cramped fetal position. A family photo in a waterproof case, severely faded, barely shows a smiling woman and child, carried into battle, preserved by the cold, now a heartbreaking testament to what was lost. Surveying the complete wreck site, we assess her final resting position. The debris field surrounding the crash site contains equipment pieces and personal items, each documenting the final moments of Flight 44-2265. An unused parachute pack, silk rotted away but metal hardware intact, proves the crew never had a chance to abandon the aircraft. The end came too suddenly for escape. Mission complete. We've documented her final resting place. These men will be remembered. Days later, a recovery team descends with specialized archaeological equipment. Our mission: document and retrieve identification items for 10 families who have waited generations for answers, splitting up to cover all crew positions efficiently, carefully retrieving the pilot's identification tags. First Lieutenant James R. Morrison, pilot. His family will finally have closure after 77 years of uncertainty. One by one, we identify them all. Technical Sergeant William T. Chun, Chinese-American radio operator. Lieutenant Carlos Martinez, Latino bombardier, only 22 years old. Second Lieutenant David M. Goldstein, Jewish-American navigator, far from home. Master Sergeant Robert L. Washington, African-American flight engineer, in an integrated crew fighting fascism abroad. Corporal Sean P. O'Brien, port waist gunner, rosary beads still tangled in his skeletal fingers. Sergeant Peter J. Kowalski at the starboard position. Sergeant Anthony J. Russo, ventral gunner, his family photo preserved against all odds. 10 souls identified. 10 families will finally know what happened to their boys who never came home from the war. A permanent memorial ensures they'll never be forgotten. Bronze plaque engraved with crew names secured to the fuselage with marine epoxy. In memory of the crew of B-29 to 2,265. Lieutenant Morrison, Sergeants Chun, Martinez, Goldstein, Washington, Kowalski, O'Brien, Russo, and 2 others, all honored here in the deep, leaving the Superfortress to rest, a war grave and monument beneath Arctic waters. Memorial service held weeks later, both above the waves and 70 meters below. 10 wreaths for 10 heroes, marking where they fell. Research submersible descending for a complete three-dimensional mapping of the wreck site, creating a permanent digital record. Every rivet and detail preserved for future generations to study virtually. Laser scanning captures the aircraft in microscopic detail, scanning the unexploded ordnance from a safe distance, determining stability and environmental risk. The bombs remain volatile, a danger that will persist for decades more. Complete scan achieved. This superfortress is now preserved digitally for all time, ensuring her story and the sacrifice of her crew will never fade from memory. Months of regular maintenance dives ensure the memorial remains legible. Then comes an unexpected find. Wait, a classified materials container buried near the tail section. This could be significant, potentially holding answers about their mysterious mission. Carefully exposing the container from decades of sand and sediment. Could this hold answers about why they were flying over Greenland? Don't move. Another 6-gill shark glides overhead, ancient and massive. They're attracted to our activity, lifting the classified container slowly to prevent damage, sending it topside for analysis. More navigation equipment discovered nearby. This may have been a navigator's emergency kit, scattered during the violent impact. Navigation compass still intact after 7 decades underwater. Emergency equipment scattered everywhere indicates they knew they were going down. The flare gun chamber is empty. They tried to signal for help during their final descent. The life raft was never deployed. The end came too quickly for the crew to react. Evidence mounts, painting a clearer picture of their final minutes. Severe ice damage visible on the wing leading edge. That's what brought her down. Icing conditions overwhelmed the aircraft's de-icing systems. Ice damaged all 4 engines simultaneously. They lost power and couldn't maintain altitude over the frozen Greenland coast. The instruments tell the final story. Overheating engines, descending rapidly, fuel still aboard. The flight engineer's panel shows engine temperature gauges in the red zone, altimeter reading dangerously low. Deploying remotely operated vehicle for internal fuselage exploration, accessing areas too risky for divers. Inside the cramped fuselage, the ROV discovers another crew position we initially missed. 11th crew member found. Record showed only 10 crew. Staff Sergeant Thomas R. Jackson, flight engineer's mate, off duty when catastrophe struck. This changes everything we knew about the mission. The ROV retrieves letters in a remarkably intact waterproof pouch. On the surface, conservators carefully open it. The letter survived. Final words from Staff Sergeant Jackson to his wife Margaret. If you're reading this, our mission has gone wrong. His voice reaches across 7 decades. Final documentation pass ensures every detail is recorded, every crew member honored. The investigation complete, we ascend for the final time. Mission complete. 11 souls identified, their stories told, their families notified. The Superfortress remains below, a war grave, a monument, and now a thriving reef supporting countless marine species. They rest in the deep Arctic waters off Greenland's coast, but they will never be forgotten. Their sacrifice, their courage, and their final mission are now part of history, preserved both in cold ocean depths and in our collective memory. The sea has claimed them, but we have reclaimed their stories. Mission complete. We've documented her final resting place. These men will be remembered. Days later, a recovery team descends with specialized archaeological equipment. Our mission: document and retrieve identification items for 10 families who have waited generations for answers, splitting up to cover all crew positions efficiently, carefully retrieving the pilot's identification tags. First Lieutenant James R. Morrison, pilot. His family will finally have closure after 77 years of uncertainty. One by one, we identify them all. Technical Sergeant William T. Chun, Chinese-American radio operator. Lieutenant Carlos Martinez, Latino bombardier, only 22 years old. Second Lieutenant David M. Goldstein, Jewish-American navigator, far from home. Master Sergeant Robert L. Washington, African-American flight engineer, in an integrated crew fighting fascism abroad. Corporal Sean P.